all of climate and sustainability is effectively thinking about the planet as a owner and taking a long-term view on the planet's health, and the economics just start making sense. I think more important to drive action today rather than talk about idealistic ideas in the long term.
Hello and welcome to the Regenerative Design Podcast. I'm your host, Mathieu Mehuys, and in this show, I interview the leading authorities in the world of regenerative practices, people who do good and do well. Are you a person that cares about your environment and our planet, that wants to leave the planet to our children to be something that we can be truly proud of, to enjoy for many generations to come? But are you also a person that believes we can do all of this and do good in business? I have really good news for you. You're here listening to the podcast that is all about making our planet a better place and making your business more successful. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Regenerative Design Podcast with your host Mathieu. And today we have another amazing special guest. And this is really a powerhouse from India. His name is Ankit Todi. And Ankit is the Chief Sustainability Officer of the Mahindra Group, which is based in India, doing a lot of projects, mostly in India, but also a little bit worldwide. And Ankit is instrumental for the sustainability development of this company, and he has created a planet positive strategy that has a huge impact on the group. And Ankit is really important for the future of this global group and how it will change these industries that I already talked about. So Ankit, welcome to the show. Tell me, how are you doing today?
Thank you, Matthew, for having me and for those very kind words.
My pleasure. So Ankit, I always like to start my interviews with asking you, what's your backstory? How did you end up in such a big global company with such a big and important position? Like, even in your childhood, was there any signs that you would become so important for this company and even for India? I'd love to hear that.
Oh, absolutely, Matthew. Again, thank you for that question. It's hard to sort of predict the future, so I wouldn't say that I knew where I would be in my early days. But the reason I did get into the climate and sustainability space has got to do with my childhood, to some extent at least. So I was born and brought up in this part of India called Dibrugarh, which is generally known as the tea city of India. And even today, it's a very clean, green place surrounded by tea gardens, and tea gardens often have a lot of trees for shading purposes. I also had this neighbor who used to use a little bit of space in my house to sort of prepare a lot of saplings that would eventually be planted across the road. As a child, I remember sort of being involved, or at least generally standing and watching and asking and talking to him. So I think a lot of that love for nature comes from childhood experiences, for sure. I often also refer to this Cartoon Network show, and people around the world born in the 80s and 90s perhaps could relate to it. There used to be a Cartoon Network show called Captain Planet, which again way ahead of its time, I would imagine, which talked about environment and ecological consequences, etc. And again, as a childhood, I remember watching that show. So definitely childhood experiences shape you. But in terms of, how did I end up in my current role? I think a lot of other factors played a role. I do have an engineering background, ended up in management consulting for a while, was doing business strategy. And then when I had this opportunity where I figured that it was possible to really rethink sustainability from a more strategic lens, and also sort of combine personal areas of interest with professionalism. I think that's where these things came together, and over the last 4 years, that's what I've been doing at Mahindra. So it's been quite a journey so far.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's very cool to hear that some seeds were planted when you were a child. And I'm just curious, because I didn't fully understand where you were grown up. Is that the state that actually has? I know in India there's one state that organic farming is completely obligated, or they don't allow chemicals. Is that correct, or
so
you know what I'm talking about?
You are correct about the fact that there is such a state in India, but I am not from that state. It's in the vicinity. So I was born in the state of Assam, and within the state of Assam, a specific place called Dibrugarh, which is known as one of the major places where tea is grown.
Wow,
Lots of
amazing.
tea gardens in and around the place. So that exposure definitely was there. From there, there's
Wow.
also a river on the the city is on the banks of a river, so that also plays a role in the local environment.
Nice. Well, nice. Very cool. So I would love to understand more from your experience. Like when you started to join the Mahindra Group, what was the current state of like the sustainability approach, the goals? Because I feel like a lot of companies started maybe in the 90s, in the 2000s, like, oh, we have to do something around sustainability. And for many companies, it was like, oh, it's kind of like a cost position or something. So I'd love to hear from your experience, what was the state of the Mahindra Group when you joined, and how did you then start to reshape it?
No, absolutely. So the Mahindra Group is roughly speaking about an 80-year-old organization and is present in multiple different industries, largely in India but also around the world. And I think the group's sustainability journey generally started in the 2000s era, specifically around 2007, 2008,
Mm-hmm.
when the team had put together the first sustainability report. This was
Mm-hmm.
now roughly speaking more than almost 20 years back. So that's where a lot of the thinking started coming into how do you really think about the subject, or rather, how do you think about businesses, not just from a purely profit view, but what is called a triple bottom line,
Mm-hmm.
the purpose, profit, and planet view
Mm-hmm.
of things. And that's where the ethos of what we now call sustainability, ESG, and there's a lot of nomenclature to use, but the general purpose driven organization that is going to look at how can businesses also create a positive impact, be it on the planet or on the people that are engaged with it. So that's where this thing started. But yeah, over the last many years, I think the journey has evolved quite a bit. So I think we definitely had a few commitments which became more tangible over a period of time. And then I think over the last 4 or 5 years, particularly, also started to see how do we really think about integrating a lot more of the sustainability and climate action as a core part of business strategy itself, and not really looking at it in silos. So there has been a lot of evolution over the years, but yes, the journey has probably been now for 2 decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So, and then what what were some of the or what have been some of the most important strategies, things, systems that you have integrated in the Mahindra Group that you think have and will have the biggest impact on creating a future for the planet where we can live more in harmony with nature rather than distracting. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think to my mind, the biggest thing that we have been able to do is, as I said, really make the business case for why this is important and good for business, instead
Mm-hmm.
of trying to look at it from a standalone moral argument or a compliance argument. How
Yeah.
can we really have a business first argument that aligns better with this? So
Yeah.
we a large group generally has many stakeholders, many different companies with their respective CEOs, etc. So,
Mm-hmm.
important piece of exercise was to really bring together some of the senior stakeholders under the guidance of our group MD. And then, over a period of about 6 odd months, we discussed different things that we should really look at. And that's where this concept of what we call the planet positive strategy came into being. We
Mm-hmm.
said that as a business, there are broadly three types of actions or three areas of action. The first set of actions are things where you have direct control over your operations. So,
Mm.
very specifically, all the energy that you use, scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, what we call. So, all the direct energy consumption within the factories, within the plants, offices, etc. How do we look at that being more energy efficient, being powered through green electricity, and
Mm-hmm.
so on. So that became one area of action. The other area is that we cannot just have a carbon view to the climate space, but we also have to
Yeah.
look at a holistic impact from water and how we use that. What kind of waste do we generate? How do we ensure that we don't contribute to landfills? And then finally, also looking at material consumption in particular. So as a company that is big in manufacturing and construction, we consume a lot of material, be it steel, concrete, and a wide variety of other materials. So being
Mm-hmm.
mindful of how do we ensure that we consume less material, try and be more efficient in our material use, use material which has a lower emission footprint, use material which is recyclable, easy to recycle, at the same
Mm.
time also increase content of recycled material. So a mix of these things under the ambit of material circularity. So those became a big part of what we call, trying and ensuring that our operations itself become greener. And that's where we have the, relatively speaking, the highest level of control. The second part became that all of this, for it to really scale and become mainstream, it's important to take an industry wide view. So a lot
Mm.
of changes can't happen standalone by one company. It will require participation from peers, from supply chain partners, from government policy, etc. So the idea was that how do we take an industry view and look at decarbonizing the industries we operate in. Now,
Mm.
this could mean very different things for different sectors, but broadly speaking, it's the green transition. So the
Mm-hmm.
auto sector moving to electric vehicles, the real estate sector talking about low emission or net zero construction, green buildings, etc. The holidays business or resorts businesses doing similarly green holidays and green infrastructure and so on. Even
Nice.
financing has a role in terms of playing a role in green financing, etc. So the idea was that really how can we, think and emphasize on this transition, be present in businesses where which are more, let's say, in resonance with environmental action, so renewable energy in particular or recycling in particular, and then subsequently also take a view on how do we bring our supply chains along in this journey, because a lot of this cannot happen without policy in supply chain.
Yeah.
So that became the broader second pillar of action, let's say. The third pillar of action is what I call areas where you play a role in the larger ecosystem.
Mm.
Sometimes maybe core to business, sometimes may not be core to business, but at the intersection of social equity and also ensuring nature conservation. So, for from a Mahindra Group perspective, farmers are an important stakeholder. We sell a lot of tractors and other things in the farm sector.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we help the farmers build climate resilience? That's
Mm-hmm.
one area where there are a few, both businesses as well as our philanthropic work happens in that segment. There's also work that we do generally to ensure that we don't do, net harm to nature. So wherever possible, invest in preserve biodiversity,
Mm-hmm.
especially where we own large land areas in businesses like resorts, real estate, etc. So how do we contribute to protecting, natural ecosystems and further augmenting these ecosystems? And a lot of this will happen through what I call enablers. Being transparent in reporting and disclosure as a large group, sort of being willing to participate with new innovative players, especially startups, etc. in this segment. There's a lot of work that has to be done on the policy side, working closely with industry associations and governments, and then finally also capability building, because this segment, or rather the entire area of climate and sustainability, is one where there's a lot of evolution which is happening with each passing year. So how do we really participate and make sure that everyone is part of this journey, because it really can't be done in silos. All parts of a organization generally will have to come together, think about this, and implement this.
This podcast is brought to you by the Garden of Your Dreams Masterclass. Are you struggling with finding the right tools and tricks for your garden? Are you lacking the confidence to be a self-sufficient gardener? Do you sometimes get overwhelmed by the lack of knowledge and time you have to actually do gardening? Then the Garden of Your Dreams Masterclass is for you. No, that's amazing. Yeah, wow. What an amazing wide variety. And I love that you're going, not just looking in the group, but also all the, let's say, the whole supply chain. And then it's so clear. So I would love to go a little bit deeper in the farming aspect in India and position, obviously, that Mahindra produces a lot of tractors. Like, do you see a potential or an evolution in creating new machines, even new tractors, or even helping farmers to make a transition to be more regenerative and helping them to be more ecological in farming. Is that something you're working on actively, or is that more? Yeah, I'm curious to know more about that.
No, absolutely. There are, anything that will help farmers become more climate resilient or be more adaptive to climate change is good for the country, but also, very selfishly good for the company.
Yeah.
The more money farmers make and the more stability that they have, the more likelihood of them purchasing and spending more on equipment. So there's a very strong business case there, and as a result, we do undertake a few activities. Now, generally speaking, there are more specific examples that I could share with you. So we have a business for drip irrigation. Now,
Oh,
it's a
cool.
relatively small business, but drip irrigation is known to be one of the most effective solutions to combat or rather build climate resilience, especially for areas where rainfall patterns are erratic, and also has indirect benefits in terms of, let's say, saving water but improving crop yield. So that's
Yeah.
something that we provide as a service, and generally at very very competitive or rather subsidized rates, again supported by the government in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
There is a part of Mahindra Group where we sell different kinds of seeds,
Yeah.
especially rice seeds and potato bulbs and a few other seeds. And there we are trying to see how do we bring in varieties of seeds which are more climate resilient, use less resources, especially water, so that they are more drought resistant, for instance. So that's
Amazing.
another business that is there. We have a third action where we help, or rather are creating awareness around ways of planting rice and selling machinery which help with direct seeding of rice, which again is
Wow.
environmentally more conscious and favorable practice of rice cultivation. There
Nice.
are other indirect ways also in which we are supporting the ecosystem, as I said, from our philanthropic work, where there's a program where we look at helping women farmers in particular with learning more about regenerative agriculture and other similar practices which help with, let's say, farm sustenance. So there's a whole host of things. Again, this is not core business for us. Not all of
No.
it is core business for us. At the end of the day, our farm sector is more of a equipment company, but
Mm-hmm.
there are definitely indirect ways and some direct ways in which we are in which we are helping.
Nice. That's amazing. That's very interesting that you're also supporting the farmers where you can, and particularly women. It's actually, I think, I don't know if you've heard of this listed, which is called Project Drawdown. It's like a list of, I think, 50 to 100 ways that we can regenerate the planet, and I think in the top three or at least top five, there's like we have to empower specifically girls, or like give educations to girls, because in many countries the women have a lot of decision power, and so when you educate girls, then they will make better decisions. So I find that interesting that you're also focusing on that. So yeah, and then I was just because I feel like the biggest one of the bigger innovations, or industry that's growing rapidly now, is the biotech industry, but more specifically the microorganism industry. Like, are you aware of that? Are you working in that field too? Because I feel there's a lot of potential in that realm too.
No, absolutely. I do have some, very basic understanding on the subject, but to be very honest, it's not an area that we are working as a group. There are a number of Indian companies, though, which are generally what I call the agri input companies.
Yeah.
So they provide all kinds of pesticides, herbicides, and biological products to the
Hmm.
farmers for different types of crops. So that segment in India is definitely maturing, and
Oh,
we do engage with a few of them from time to time, but not really a core part of our business per se.
no, no, I understand. So I'm also curious to understand deeper, like you already mentioned that before, that for you sustainability, it's not just like, oh, this is something we have to do because of a goodwill, or because of yeah, just like kind of like a charity. Maybe plant a few trees left and right, and then you call yourself a green company. Like you already go way deeper into like, okay, there's an actual business case in investing in green technologies, sustainability, regeneration. So I'd love to know from you, like, what project are you most excited about for the next 5 years, in terms of having a big impact on the environment, but also obviously to grow a business? Because let's be honest, true sustainability, it has to be financially sound, because if there's a minor crisis or something, if it doesn't fit the business profile, they will just neglect it very fast, even if they say that they have all these goals and everything. So yeah, I'm curious to know what is it that you're most excited about for the next 5 years?
No, absolutely, Matthew. You're quite right that things will scale only if there is a strong business for case for it. So either from a revenue augmentation perspective or from a what I would call cost saving perspective. So generally speaking, to me, the energy transition is the part of climate action that has the highest impact. Now there
Mm,
are three subcomponents of it. The first component is, let's say, energy efficiency. The second component is renewable energy, and the third component is electrification. So
mm,
these together are basically the areas where I see a lot happening in a manner that is economically and environmentally a win, and also will create the highest amount of impact. So specifically when I talk about energy efficiency, for instance, from a Mahindra standpoint, we have been able to increase our energy efficiency, especially for our manufacturing businesses, by more than 100% over the last decade or so, which basically means that you are able to make the same car at half the amount of energy,
wow.
which is can be a big win. There's a strong cost saving angle to it. Most of the projects here also offer a very good payback period. And the moment you expand this across at a country level, you realize that the impact can be very significant across manufacturing industries, but also in other areas such as, let's say, cooling, for instance. If we
Mm,
take a slightly, mid-term view, cooling requirement of energy because of cooling, both for residential, commercial applications, data centers, etc., is going to be a big thing. So
mm,
focusing on initiatives, innovation, etc., around cooling energy efficiency can play a big role. So that's one
yeah.
example. The second part, which is, as I said, the renewable energy part of it. So renewable energy, again, in India at least, a lot of different kinds of renewable energy sources today are relatively cheaper. Can be as cheap as 30 to 40% for the first 50% or so of energy use, and then subsequently you do need to add beyond solar and wind storage and other solutions, which are still at price parity or may come at a bit of a premium, but it's a matter of time that everything will be cost competitive in that journey. So I think focusing on that, again, from a Mahindra Group perspective, we are trying to increase our renewable energy share across businesses. We are currently at under 30%, but have a number of projects which will get us to 60-65% next year or so, and then
Wow. So
subsequently.
just to interrupt, already the Mahindra Group is using 30% renewable.
Yeah, roughly speaking, we are close to
Wow.
30% renewable energy, and we currently have a number of projects that will take us to about 60 to 65% by
Wow.
next year
Amazing.
itself. So once these get commissioned at scale, and
That's
then
amazing.
we are not stopping there. I think a large part of my focus continues to be on how do we further accelerate our journey to get as close to 100% as possible, which requires both policy level interventions at the country level, solutions, especially around storage becoming more competitive, and then subsequently a lot of other decisions. But that's one of the most meaningful and impactful actions that's happening. And then if I jump to the third area, is the electrification. Now,
Hmm.
electrification again is important in the transport sector in particular, but also industrial electrification to some extent. In the transport sector is where one of Mahindra's biggest businesses are. So we sell cars and three wheelers and four wheelers and so on. And there we are also investing in a very big way in the electrification journey. So both for three wheelers and four wheelers, there are a number of products we have which are best in class products, very price competitive as well. So that's the third area where I see the electrification of transport accelerating in a big way over the next 5 years. So all three things put together will start having very significant impact, both on the
Hmm.
company's footprint, but also generally speaking on the country's environmental footprint.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm very, very astonished, and congrats on already that achievement, and 30% and already going to 60% very soon. Sounds like that's very impressive. And then there's so much things that I could go in detail more, but we have limited time. So let's jump to well, I'll ask you this question, then we can go deeper in this. But I'm curious to know from you, like you have a vast majority, like you have a lot of experience in this field. If you could be consulting some of the biggest firms in the world, what would you tell them what they should be focusing on to be a business that can last for the future and obviously has a green impact on the world?
No, absolutely, Matthew. I think the answer honestly depends a lot on what sector you are in. I
Yeah,
think
it's a very broad question,
the
but
the sector really determines. So if you're a manufacturing company, it's very much about your own operations. How do you ensure what energy consumption you have and what material consumption you have? How do you solve for it? But also at the same time, really looking at what kind of products you're building and what is their impact, including, let's say, end of life, recycling, etc., for those products. So that's a view that you take for a manufacturing first company. But if you were a service first company, then it's a bit different. So for a finance company, it's a lot about how and why they can play a role in funding the green transition, and also sort of encouraging better behavior as a major investor, financial investor typically. Similarly, if you go to other sectors which are more what is, let's say, transportation, for instance, then again the role becomes very different on what areas to focus on. So I think the answer honestly varies quite a bit, but from a strategy perspective, I think what I spoke about, there are always these areas, in your own operations, everything from wastewater, energy, material is one thing that you optimize. From the industry itself, how do you become either a green product seller, a green service seller, or can even be an enabler to the transition from software to financing and a few other areas. Could be policy as well for a law firm, for instance, and
yeah.
so on. And then the other part that I would really stress on is that for a lot of companies, anyone, especially again, less applicable to service sector, but more applicable to, let's say, anyone who's sort of involved in production of anything, especially if you're involved with agri based products. Then I think engagement deeper with your supply chains and really helping them be part of this journey will be critical. So I think that's the broad top three things that I can talk about. But yeah, the specifics matter. Honestly, I think we are at a stage where we need to really move away from high level conversations to more specific, deeper conversations in context of the country and the company.
Yeah, no, it's a excellent answer. I love it, and what I particularly like is that you're also broadening it up to like other related services and service industries, and that even like lawyers and other people can get involved. Because yeah, I was just talking the other day with someone who's in financing, and that can help our projects to actually set up a leasing system so that if we need to make changes and get paid for that, actually the bank can already supply that. So then the incentives become much better to start acting today because the cash flow is just way better. So I think that's very important to
No,
look into
absolutely.
those.
I think the finance sector and the legal sector have a very important role to play. In fact, I think the frequency of my conversations with people from the legal fraternity has been increasing over the last few years.
Nice.
Right, both driven by regulation, I guess. In a lot of places, new regulations are coming, especially in India, I think, which are more
Yeah.
environment friendly. But at the same time, I think the more positive role as well legal firms can play in terms of structuring deals, etc. So an example that you gave, and I'll add on to it, is when it comes to, let's say, building development, often the additional investments required at the beginning can lead to very substantial energy and water savings, but the benefits occur to the owner or the people who stay there. So how do you ensure the right framework, legal framework, where benefits can be co-shared and so
Yeah.
on? So there's a lot of areas of policy as well where there's a role to be played.
Yeah, no, that's important, exactly. And then you just returned from the COP, from the United Nations Climate Conference in Brazil. I'd love to hear, like, shortly, like, what was your feeling? Do you feel that there's something different from other conferences? What is the spirit today? Is it people are ready to do, or is there a little bit of hesitation due to some financial crises around the world and other crises? Yeah,
Uh,
what's the general spirit?
Absolutely. So I ended up spending almost 2 weeks in Brazil. sort of split between Sao Paulo, where a lot of the private sector conversations were happening just in the week preceding COP, and then subsequently a week in Belém, where the actual COP took place. So while there's a lot of commentary around COP and the effectiveness of it, my general
Mm-hmm.
take continues to be that COPs continue to be very effective, and the one thing that you see, and this was the third time that I was attending COP, so I can say that both the presence of the corporate ecosystem, or that the private sector as a whole, right from corporates to investors, especially sovereign funds, etc., or impact funds, and then subsequently also bankers, has been growing with each passing year, and the conversations are moving away from idealism to pragmatism. So while a lot of people come with good intent, but at the same time, the idea is that how are you doing more pragmatic conversations to really scale
Yeah.
solutions? And thankfully, more than half of the climate friendly solutions today, there's a strong business case for it. It's a
Nice.
growing market, so you could really see that change happening year on year, where conversations are now more about pragmatic action. The
Yeah.
second thing that I would really add is that when it comes to financing, while there is a lot of narrative that there's not sufficient financing, I sort of slightly disagree with that, in the sense that for areas where there's a strong business case, there's more than ample funding available. It's
Mm-hmm.
often the areas where the business case still needs to be established, or policy reforms need to take place, or for areas like adaptation and climate risk, those areas
Mm-hmm.
will require public support, will require more broader
Yeah.
financing. But for a
Yeah.
lot of areas, such as, let's say, the energy transition in particular, especially establishing more renewable energy assets, etc., there is more than sufficient funding available. It's more about how do we really address the bottlenecks right now in terms of implementation,
Mm-hmm.
both policy as well as operational challenges, etc., and really accelerate the journey. There are other segments, especially within the adaptation bucket, where I think a lot more financing is required. So the third point, in fact, I would add is also adaptation sort of gaining significance and importance. I think within climate conferences, people are realizing that we can't just have a mitigation and a carbon only view. We really will have to have a broader view on the subject, including water, soil, and a few other areas. Adaptation being especially critical for any industry or any set of stakeholders who depend on the food value chain.
Mm-hmm.
Also critical for infrastructure, especially as we are building new infrastructure, different kinds of infrastructure in different parts of the world. Biodiversity was obviously a very important part of COP, especially as
Mm-hmm.
you were in Brazil. The city of Belém itself was a great example of how biodiverse the world is. You had the Atlantic Sea on one end, you had a river on the other end, and then you had the majestic Amazon forests. So it was pretty much at the intersection of these three things that you had the city. So there was a lot to do on the biodiversity front. But all in all, I would say that definitely am more optimistic that pragmatism and implementation is the theme, and there's a lot happening, also led a lot by the private sector.
Yeah, that's crucial, and that's very good to hear that there is that shift happening. No, it's a paradigm shift, because I feel up until, let's say, 2020, or even today, is like, oh, sustainability is something that we have to do, and it's all about like how to reduce our bad impact. And that was the paradigm. Okay, we're going to reduce emissions by 30% till 2050. Like, it's all about doing less harm, and that's important, but that's not enough. And some people may be like, yeah, but this is already really tough, and then how should we do even more? Well, the good news is, if you do like regenerative, and that paradigm shift is happening, because what you're talking about to me is regeneration, where the business cases become really strong. So it almost becomes like a no-brainer to get into sustainability or regeneration, because it's just more profitable, even if you have to work with stronger financing. So very cool to hear that shift is happening as we talk. And so, yeah, I want to be respectful of your time, so we're going to start wrapping it up. But I have my final question for you. Since you're such an example to the world, many people look up to you, what you've already accomplished. What is your single best piece of advice for young people, but even maybe older people, that say like, hey, I really want to be part of this change, and I really want to contribute? Like, what is your best piece of advice to what people should actually be focusing on an individual level?
No, absolutely. I think I'll actually refer back to my consulting days to make that point. There was this concept of a promoter mindset when you're working in anything. So how do you really take full ownership and have a long-term view to things? I think very often in our life and work, we are often focused on the here and now, or generally
Hmm.
have a very short-term view to things. The moment you start taking a more ownership view and a long term view, I think things can really change. And all of climate and sustainability is effectively thinking about the planet as a owner and taking a long term view on the planet's health, and the economics just start making sense. So that's the one thing that I would add. And a related point would be also to really think from a win win and pragmatic argument perspective and not be idealistic about things. I
Hmm.
think it's more important to drive action today rather than talk about idealistic ideas in the long term. So that's the second part, that moving forward is more important than talking about moving forward in the future. So
I love
that's
that.
the two things that I would really emphasize on for individuals in whatever capacity and wherever they are, can work on this.
Yeah, I love that answer, because it's like I could ask you the question like, what do you think is important for the future of sustainability? But it's like, no, it's the wrong question. Like, what can we do today? So thank you for pointing that out. And Ankit, I have to say I'm very excited that you came on my show. I'm more than honored. And yeah, thank you very much for sharing all your knowledge. And hope to see you again some other time. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matthew, for having me.